Our next speaker is Sune Sunesson, now our senior professor at the Pufendorf Institute. He's been involved from the very start, and he's been a director for many years as well. And as you might have read in his abstract, we don't have a method. We don't have a model. We're a non-model. But we do have principles, and especially 3 principles. And these are the ones that Sune will talk about. And he's sharing his slot with one of our former team members, coordinator, Elisabeth Bjarnason. I can't even see, where are you? There you are, yes. Elisabeth is a software engineer, and she's from the Department of Computer Science. And she was a member and a coordinator of one of our themes called Did You Work?, which is a good example of an interdisciplinary project. So she will give you an example of what actually happens at the Pufendorf Institute. Thank you.
The idea that we had when we planned this symposium was that we should have a conference or a symposium with the aim of exposing our institute's distinctive features. Not comparing it to other things really, but just presenting the distinctive features. We had we call it the distinctive feature symposium as a planning name. But before I go into the Pufendorf non-model, I'll show you some pictures. This first picture, maybe you understand what it is. It's the drawing, it's the plan of building a new department of physics in Lund. And in the upper right corner, there is a name. It's Oscar. And who was Oscar? It was the king. The king ordered this building to be built. And it was built in 1888. And then it was the first university building outside the old city wall perimeter. So when Ann-Katrin said that the university started to develop outside the center of the city, our building was the first to do that. But on the other hand, this was a disciplinary start. It was very important for the Department of Physics. But as it is in a university, this is some of the gadgets that the people there, we have physicists here. I think this has to do with studying spectra, is that right? And these physics things were developed, and here they are taught, as you can see. But in due time, this institute, this building, was obsolete, and it was replaced by art. As you can see, it was replaced by antiquities and the studies of classical archaeology. Up to the day when the then he's sitting here, by the way, Göran Bexell, he was the vice chancellor at the time, took up his sledgehammer and said that this wall is made of putty. Well, I'll just tear it down. And then he did. You see that next picture? Light is coming in, isn't it? And he said, in this building, we're not going in for so-called useful science any longer. So what did that mean, actually? It meant that we had a new area, a new space for discussions and for meetings. Still, some of the Greek stuff was there, of course. couldn't just throw it away. But on the other hand, a lot of other things came about. The point is that the three principles that we have are, in a way, they're not referring to interdisciplinarity per se. They're defining an ethos, a framework, a strategy for opening up a space. The bottom-up principle is we don't tell our participants what to think, what to do, and what to do research about. Of course, this is not only areas. It's actually something that it's a defense mechanism in a way. It's a defense mechanism against much of that Oskar talked about. The utilization of the word interdisciplinarity to foster the opposite of autonomous learning. That is very heteronomy. Was it heteronomy? Is that the word? That is the opposite of autonomy. And of course, the bottom-up principle calls for people to make their own choices. The second is also something that is a defense principle for free research. No expected deliverables principles. We don't expect deliverables. When we invite the theme to the institute, we do not prescribe the way we want them to report their results. Of course, also a defense principle. The third is the open space and framework principle. This may seem airy, but it means that we can work in a number of ways. Of course, it's not only so, these are ideological standpoints, of course, but they are necessary for people to find and try to make their own interdisciplinary experiences. So, of course, we have to choose. This is I call it, sometimes it's called Sune's whiteboard. It's part of the way of selecting the theme groups, of course, and that of course means that we have to try to understand which groups that can be able to do this experimental work of creating different kinds of interdisciplinarity. So here we have social scientists sitting around engineers and trying to talk their way out of asymmetry. But we do other things too. This is a string quartet. It's not the victim of asymmetry. And sometimes we even take on study visits. The stout man in the middle is no other than the son of Fidel Castro. So, openness in all ways, and creating an area where we can experiment with all the problems of interdisciplinarity. So, that's what I was going to talk about.
Elizabeth will take over now, and there will be minutes for asking questions together after Elizabeth's talk.
So. Oops. Let's see. Yes, it's working. Thank you. So I'm going to share a little bit of our experience. We were a theme at the Pufendorf 2 years ago. We finished 1 year ago, and we were looking into the digitalization of work life, how all these digital tools, systems, equipment, robots, how that affects how we work and what we work with and how we organize work. So I'm going to share a little bit about this exploration that we did, the journey that we did, and how we did it, because we had a rough go when we started out, and it was clarified as we went along. In the end, we discovered that it was the actual journey that was the point of this exercise. We have some output too that I'm going to show you, but just going to give you a little glimpse of how we worked. So this is the team. We were in total, we started out 11 people. There was one person that dropped off. So in the end, we were 10 in the core team that met once a week to discuss this topic and work with it and explore. So and as you can see, I've put our disciplines here. We were quite a wide range of disciplines, just 10, 11 people in itself. Researchers is quite a large team. I come from industry, I worked in industry, so in industry 10 people is nothing, but in research is quite a big project to coordinate. And then we have this wide range of disciplines, research areas in. So work sociology, we had a cognitive psychologist, as me, software engineering, working with the technical sides, how you design these systems. Someone from business administration, history, ethnology. As you can see, it's a very wide range of topics and quite a large group and lots of different personalities, which is really fun and challenging at the same time and enabled us to look at things from very many different angles. And we also were a team that didn't know each other when we started out. We'd met a few times to put together our application, but when we started in September, we basically didn't really know each other. So we had an exciting journey ahead of us. We also collected some souvenirs along the way. Output deliverables, yes, but it's mostly souvenirs. When you go on a journey, it's nice to take things home with you to remember the journey by, but it's actually the journey that's important. So our main souvenir was, I don't know, there's probably a light on this, I won't do that. We put together a poster exhibit at the end. We had involved a comic artist that was involved in our team and worked with us and sort of illustrated the different things that we discovered along the way. So in the end, we ended up with 10 posters that we showed at, I think, 3 different occasions to share our findings and to share what we'd learnt. One of the places we shared it at was the END seminar, which was actually a year ago, May last year, where we showed the posters, invited people, we had a debate with invited speakers around the topics that we were exploring. And during the autumn, also, we put together a book based on these comics and based on the different themes and analytical points that we come up with and added some texts. So these are really nice. I've got the book with me here. If anyone wants to look at it, you can glance at it later. And then we have the personal networks. I think that is the biggest and most important output of this. We got to know each other. In this group of 10, 11 researchers, there are lots of different clusters that are continuing to work. We've got lots of ideas about things we could research within this area together. So there are grant applications ongoing. There are some studies ongoing that have come out of this. And there are still talks and plans and ideas about what we can do. So how did we do this? How did we travel? As I said, when we started out in September, we didn't really know each other, so we had to start out by getting to know each other. Who are these 10, 11 different people, personality-wise, and also research-wise? What are our topics? What are our competencies? What can we contribute? So we asked everyone to prepare a little presentation, 10, 15 minutes of their research and who they were. And we were thinking, oh, that will take one day to go through. It ended up taking, I think, like 3 times or something to get through all that, because there was a lot to explore when you start digging into who people are. We also put forward key articles that we'd written that we thought were relevant for our research. So we ended up with a reading list that we could learn about each other. We invited other external speakers to come in and give us input. We had someone that came to talk about work environment in this digital age. We had someone come and talk about robotics and artificial intelligence. There was a psychologist that came to talk about the brain and how the brain is impacted by using digital equipment and stuff. So, and we also had some collaborating guests. We had Molly Stenström from Carnegie Mellon that came for a couple of weeks, and then we had Melissa Gregg from Intel. She came for 2 months to work together with us and became a part of our team for that time. And all of this input, then we could have lots and lots of open discussions. That was a lot of the autumn was open discussions, exploring, discovering things, and trying to figure out what we were doing and where we were heading. Also, we had the speed dating exercise. That was quite a fun exercise. One day we paired up 2 and 2, and we had 5 minutes in this pair to discover and try to explore what could we two do together. And then after 5 minutes, we switched to the next pair. So the idea was to brainstorm topics and things we could research. I think in reality it was a fun way to get to know each other. So that was the main output of that one. And then during the autumn, we had an idea. I put case studies there. We had an idea when we went into the theme that we wanted to do some kind of empirical work. And during the autumn, we were discussing how do we do this. Some of the researchers had empirical material coming in. There were a couple of researchers that looked a lot at teachers and how tools impact teachers. We had nurses and doctors. People had studied them. And during the time together, we also expanded. We picked a few other professions like lorry drivers, estate agents, office workers using Facebook at work. And then from these, we extracted scenarios, work-life scenarios that we could analyze together. And that, over time, we found this way of doing analysis together that would include all our different disciplinary aspects and research areas. And we found that when we actually had scenarios of work to look at together, it was a concrete example. For example, we had one lorry drivers, when we were interviewing them, we heard that they use digital fleet management systems. So each lorry, the office can sort of tell where the lorries are, they can read how much fuel, and we heard about competitions. Some employers use these competitions to stress their drivers to work harder and not to use so much fuel. And we heard that some people were driving felt very they didn't like that, so they would go to another employer. So that was a typical scenario that we could then analyze and discuss together from our different disciplinary angles. So we did that, and out of that came a lot of analytical points. So the lorry driver example was an example of time management. When you've digitalized the work environment you work in, it's a lot easier for management to see what you are doing and how good you are performing. And there are lots of aspects of that. And then we had the collaboration with Maja Lindén, the comic artist, and that was really interesting. During the spring, we would bring forward our scenarios, share our points with her, and she would add her artistic thoughts and her ideas and would sketch something for us, and she would add to our findings. So together we produced these posters that we showed it a few times, and they were really helpful because they added something to our analysis too, because she was an external person that would give us some more thoughts and angles into our analysis. So one more example, we have context collapse there when you have a professional work life, but you also have a private one. So one scenario we looked at was nurses. I've got this one here, I think, an example of one of these comics. So this is nurses that work with the children with diabetes. So we made a few interviews, and someone told us a little story. Yes, there is a problem when you become friends with the parents on Facebook. You might end up getting information that you're not really supposed to have, but how should I deal with this? I am a professional nurse, and I find out through a private channel that this child that I'm caring for has gone on holiday and he hasn't got his equipment, his medical equipment. So what should I do then as a nurse? So this is an example of one of these themes, the collapse of the environments. So I'm soon running up. I got 3 minutes. I am soon done. So this has been an amazing journey for us, and I think all of us, we've got at least Carol. Is there anyone else here from DigiWork? We've got Carol Eiley up there. So it has been, we've learned a lot, I think, over the year, both about the topic itself, of course, but also about how to do this, how to manage this large team. I think a lot of what I have learned as a coordinator was to give leeway, to allow people to do the things they want to do in the way they want to do, but also to vary the way of working, because not everyone enjoyed sitting in a room for 8 hours and talking. So over time, we needed to find different ways of working in smaller groups, working in larger groups, being allowed to go off and read by yourself, to actually vary the way we're working. But also, we quite early on had a little bit of structure, so we don't want to give too much structure, but a little bit of structure, so that the whole team has an idea of this is where we're heading and this is what we're doing, and also have an openness. What would you like to hear about? Who would you like to invite? So as I said, we continue. There are lots of things going on, and we don't sort of formally stay in touch, but we bump into each other and other stuff that's going on. I think that's what I wanted to say. Are there questions now? Or?
Thank you.
Yes?
Yes, we do have time for some questions before there will be coffee and a little bit of breakfast served right outside here. But we have time for questions. Anyone?
Thanks. Sune, since you have been doing this for a long time,
Yes.
which would you say has been the most rewarding, successful program and why? Or a couple if you do not want to single just one.
Well, that's very, you know, it's really a sensitive thing. I mean,
Few.
a few, yes, but of course, one of the best was the one that Elizabeth is just talking about, and the point of that was that they managed to build a common ground much like a common object of knowledge when they in the construction of this scenario thing, which made things much easier because they got then they had something in common to work on and to help each other to understand the asymmetries and all those things. So that was a very good example, and there were others. The first one, our really flagship project was, of course, the first one, the astrobiology theme that I showed some pictures from too.
Without going into specifics, could you take the other extreme and say what things you think have not worked in other projects without saying the names?
You know, regrets, yes. Here come the regrets. Yes. No, well, sometimes there has been an imbalance and that people have had a very, very, very difficult time, even to understand what the asymmetries were. So I mean, it's and what the problems were. So sometimes they went away and they just started talking to each other, and some nicely and some less nicely, but there were a couple of them too. So
questions?
Yes, Andrea Nardi.
For Elizabeth, you mentioned that bringing an artist into your group
Yes.
for representation of your
Yes.
findings has been also interesting for analysis. So I wonder if this artist could have been also a researcher in your group, or you think it's, I mean, an artist or art science, if there is a science for
I
art
think it
type.
added that she was external. Yes, a researcher could probably illustrate their own work, but the whole point, I think, is working together with different people is that you look at the same thing together and you each add your perspective. Mm-hmm. So by having someone else come in, she added yet another perspective, more of it like the artistic view, of course, but also as a normal person without any of these disciplinary glasses on. So.